We'll walk there right now, but we have Nicholas Hammond from
Thank you. Do I need that, or?
Yes, I'm going to give you this,
Okay.
and you can hold on to it.
But
I'll
I'll let
just
you
yell.
talk, I'll let you talk first if you want to, or you just want me to start.
Well, I'll give it to you. You can hold on to it.
Anyway, most of you have seen me or out there before, so this kind of feels like old home week that we're seeing each other again. But when you people come forward and you're so kind and have so many lovely things to say, but often we have to kind of hurry it up because there are people standing behind you. And the reason for something like this is it gives us a chance to just talk a little bit more, more in detail if there's anything you want to ask, anything about anything at all. It doesn't matter. I mean, I know most people who are here are Spider-Man fans, but I've done a fair bit of work over the years, and a lot of people have seen me in a lot of different shows. And I mean, no matter how obscure they are, from an episode of Magnum PI to Lord of the Flies to whatever. If there's ever anything that you might have seen in the past that you had a question about, that's why I'm here. So please do. But beforehand, maybe we should have a little chat ourselves.
Yeah, just a little chat, Yeah, we can start off. All right. So welcome. How's your time been going here today?
Great, it's great. I love it. This is I've done maybe 5 shows in my life, but I have to say the 2 I've done here have been really the most enjoyable of all. Not just saying it because of you guys, it actually is the truth. And also you're also knowledgeable. I mean, you know, this is why I feel like I'm sure half of you here know more about Peter Parker than I do. But you can test me anyway, I can try. But yeah, so it's just a pleasure to meet people who are genuinely interested. They don't just want an autograph to put on the wall, which is very nice, and I'm glad you do, but are also interested in the work itself. So I'm grateful. Thank you very, very much, all of you, for coming. I know you've all got stuff to do on 4th of July week, and you could all be at the beach right now, and instead you're here, and thank you for coming. Also, personally, it's nice because Boston is a town. It was where my uncle lived all his life, and he was very dear to me, and whenever I came to visit him, I just always associate Boston with him. Of course, I went to Princeton, so the universities here I hate, but the town itself I really like. So yeah, so it's a joy to be here.
Awesome. Glad to hear. All right. Well, let's just start off with Spider-Man. So, when you first started out as Spider-Man, how did it feel your first time putting on the suit and knowing that responsibility with that character and all the comics out there already? How did it feel taking that as the first live-action depiction?
Yeah, well, it was a huge responsibility, and also I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I had done a lot of work in theater and a lot of work on television and film, but nothing even remotely like playing a superhero. And in fact, I didn't know why they wanted me for the job, because when I first went in to see them, and they said, we're doing a live-action version of Spider-Man, and I thought, well, I know the comic, and I know Superman, and I know Batman, but I thought, gee, I don't know if I'd hire me to play a superhero. But then they made it clear that actually the thing about Peter Parker was that he's just a regular guy. He's not, he doesn't look like he's made out of steel. He doesn't look perfect. He's not perfect. He's got flaws left, right, and center. And we just want him to be a normal guy. A guy that you believe is, going to school, at university, and he's working his way through college by a part-time job as a photographer, and just like thousands and thousands of other people. We want the normalcy of him is what they thought was interesting, that it could be anybody here, anyone who just happens to get bitten by this spider, and then they have this thing thrust upon them that they didn't wish for, they didn't particularly want. In some ways it's made their life infinitely more complicated and more difficult, and yet how do you deal with that, And ultimately, of course, the motto of with great power comes great responsibility, and that's something Peter has to learn that, you know, he could use that power to rob banks. He could use it to, you know, do all kinds of corrupt things to make himself lots of money. The fact that he makes the choice to use it to try to do some good for people. I think that resonated for me, and it certainly did for the people at the network. So yeah, I absolutely felt the responsibility of putting on the suit the first time. I also felt very weird putting the suit on. It's just not something you normally do, is like put this full body suit and a mask on and walk out onto 56th Street in New York in front of everybody who's just walking down the sidewalk. So I have to get over all of that. I have to just say, look, this is it. This is the role. You took the job. It's your job to do it. So, and I just grew to love it. You know, I grew to love the character. I love going to work every day and doing it. I love both. I love playing Peter, who I thought was kind of a really interesting guy and kind of bittersweet. You know, he would fall in love with girls and they didn't like him because they thought he was a nerd, because they had no idea he really was Spider-Man, all that stuff. I found all that fascinating. So I really grew to love the show, and I love doing the show. And I think every actor, you know, you've got a bucket list of stuff you want to do, and whether they admit it or not, I think almost every actor, starting in your own primetime series, is something every actor wants to have a shot at doing, at least once. And I had that opportunity. So, you know, I just was able to check that one off. And yeah. Also, just on a personal level, you know, you're talking about responsibility of playing the character, but there's also a fundamental responsibility. When you're doing a series, you know, there are 200 people working on the show, and their weekly paycheck depends on you delivering the goods and the show continuing. So, you know, I was 27, and to go to work every morning and you arrive and there's this huge army of people, you know, everybody here is here because I'm playing this role, and if I screw it up, you know, we're all out of work. And that's, I think you grow up quickly when you have a responsibility like that on your shoulders. So in a way, there was this weird sort of parallel thing of what was going on for Nicholas and what was going on for Peter Parker at the same time. So yeah, it was a lot of responsibility.
So you said it was weird to put on the suit for the first time. So how long did it take for you to adjust to being in that kind of role as you're filming? Was it like a week went by and you were like, now I'm in it, now the suit doesn't feel as weird anymore? Like, when did it finally wear off? Or did it stay weird the entire time?
No. It definitely wore off. I might say, just from a sheer physical point of view, the suit was a work in progress for a while. And the first couple suits they did were incredibly uncomfortable, very, very hot. You couldn't see out of the eyepieces. Well, they were like sunglasses is what they were, which was great when you were trying it on back in the air-conditioned studio. Then we'd get out on the street and it would be, you know, 95 degrees, and they'd say, okay, just run as fast as you can, you know, these 3 blocks, you're chasing the bad guys. Well, you go half a block, and these have steamed up. And you're just like running, and I think I have no idea what I'm doing, or, you know, I could slam into a wall any second. So then they put the little perforations in them, and they tried all kinds of things. Eventually the suit became more comfortable, and I became more comfortable. I'd say maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks to it.
Yeah.
So did you have any mishaps though that happened in that time? Like you said, with fog up. Did anything ever happen, or did you make it smoothly the entire time?
We were lucky. also, I mean, that's the whole point of having the stuntman. You know, there's a great little scene. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but at the very beginning of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Leonardo DiCaprio is explaining to a reporter what the job of a stuntman is, and as he says, you know, sure, I could probably fall off a horse if I wanted to, but if I fall off the horse and break my leg, then the whole show shuts down. Whereas if the stuntman falls off the horse, we don't shut the show down. Well, that was kind of the same with us. You know, there was some of the, I mean, I did a fair bit of the stuff as Spider-Man, especially if I had both feet flat on the ground. But once we started going up in the air, they just said, no, you're not doing that, you know, for that very reason. Yeah.
Nice, awesome.
So since the character of Peter Parker is such a relatable human being and carries such flaws and is just kind of a normal, everyday person. How did it feel to get into character? Was it easier, or was it like, you know, just because he was such a normal person with regular life things going on, or was it still a difficult character to kind of get into? Like, how did that feel?
I would say he was, I wouldn't say he was difficult, but I would say it was really just like any other role, you know. You make it, you try to make it truthful and you try to make it real, but you don't want to play yourself. You create another person. And so I just approached it like I was playing any other part. I just tried to forget about the whole kind of superhero side to it and just play the story, play the character, play the lines as though you were just, you know, just being as honest as you could possibly be. I mean, that's kind of the way I work. I just think any character you do, you just try to make it as truthful as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's the only way the audience is going to feel, you know, if a scene's supposed to be sad, I think the only way they're going to feel sad, or if it's happy, or if it's, you know, loving or whatever, I think the only way that emotion is going to be felt by the audience is if there's a truthfulness in what you do. Yeah.
How much research did you do beforehand, before playing it?
I had never read a Spider-Man comic in my life. So I quickly went out. I never thought I was going to get the job. And then when I got the job, I went straight out and bought about 10 of them. And just went right through them. Oh, I see, he's got an Aunt May, and he's got this, and he's got a boss named Jonah Jameson. So I had it all figured out. So I could go in and pretend I was an authority on day one. But to this day, most of you in this room probably know more about Spider-Man than I do. But I did what I felt was my job, you know.
Yep.
I learned the premise of the character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So, were there any most memorable moments while filming it?
That show. Yeah. We did one in Hong Kong. It was called the Dragon's Challenge, I think.
Chinese web.
What's that?
Chinese web.
No, that's right. I told you. That to me was, well, okay, some of you probably know, but around the world, outside of the United States, these things were released as feature films. They weren't released as a TV series. So what they would do is they would take either two of them and put them together and release it, or we would do an extended version of an episode, like 90 minutes long. And that was well, one was in New York, one was in Hollywood, and one was in Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong one really felt like you were in a real movie, like you were in a big movie. I mean, we had a lot of Asian actors in it. Rosalind Chow, who played kind of my love interest in it, who to this day is a close friend of mine, you know, beautiful, beautiful young Asian American girl who, 18 years old, it was her very first job, and, you know, and she was very excited, and the man who played her husband was a very, very well-established Chinese American actor, and just filming in Hong Kong, you know, and working in these extraordinary locations, it was thrilling. It was very exciting, you know, and dealing with all the kind of local culture and everything. And to show you how primitive it was, I mean, I don't know how many of you have heard of them, but these days there's these things called Steadicams where, you know, they're incredibly well, a cameraman can like walk following an actor down the street, and it is absolutely as smooth, you know, they don't have to lay track down anymore. It's these cameras that all have gyroscopes, you know, in them, and they work. Well, you know what we had? We had a cardboard box that a guy put on his shoulder with a hole in it, and the camera was inside the cardboard box, and he followed me down the street because we couldn't afford to get all the regular people off the street and hire a bunch of extras. So we just used the real people. And I just walked through the crowd of Hong Kong. And they had no idea that there was a camera following me because they thought it was just some guy with a box on his shoulder. So, you know, it was very old school that way. And speaking of that, all credit to Fred Waugh, who was the stuntman, because these days with CGI, you know, you see somebody go up a building and you think, yeah, fine, you know, that's a computer, and you punch a few buttons. No, no, no. Freddie went up the wall. He went up the building. Or if he did a swing from one rooftop to another rooftop, he did the swing from one rooftop to another rooftop. I mean, they are all real stunts that he's doing. And, you know, he was amazing, you know, and a huge amount of the success of the show goes to him, you know, and he was a great guy. He was an ex-Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus trapeze artist. So he had absolutely no fear of heights at all. And I mean, you talk about memorable moments. The day we were in the Empire State Building, and I'm in the office and shot a scene in the office, and then they open the window on the 69th floor, and Freddie just goes out the window. And I just thought, that's just no sane person. I mean, he had a heart attack, you know, but you think, okay, this is like piano wire cable holding him in the harness. But fortunately, we never had an accident on that show, which was a miracle. But I'm thrilled we never did. All credit to them. Yeah.
Cheers to that. All right. So, were there any skills? I know you had everything that was off ground you didn't do yourself. But was there anything that you had to learn while you were like firmly planted on the ground, 2 feet?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I did some of the fights.
Yeah.
You know, I did some of the fights on the ground, and so of course you work with the, you know, you work with the fight master, and you know, you choreograph it like a dance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's what. Funny enough, I did a film in Bangkok just last year that was a martial arts film. I was not the martial artist, but I played a CIA guy, but there were a lot of martial artists in it, and watching those martial arts, Muay Thai was the actual school of fighting. And I got fascinated watching them because they, you know, the detail of the way they would plan these shots, you know, of your kick is going to go to that shoulder, and then you're going to do a spin, and then your other leg is going to go here. And it's all completely charted out so brilliantly. And then when they shoot it, it's kind of a miracle to watch it all come together. So I did learn some of those, the basic ones. Yeah.
So, 2 things. Who was your favorite villain from the show that you were on? And then who was just your favorite Spider-Man villain in general, from wider comics or movies or anything like that?
I would say from our show, actually in the pilot, we had a wonderful actor named Thayer David, and he played the villain in that, who he managed to kind of, through mind control everybody, just because he was so evil. His performance was wonderful. And then I think the guy Raul Julia played in Spider-Man. I'd done a movie with Raul, and it was great to see him in that role. So I can't remember the character's name that he played, but he was terrific. But if anybody also wants to ask, well, once we get to questions, we can get off of Spider-Man eventually. But for now, and we can ask more questions about Spider-Man.
Yeah. So, once upon a time in Hollywood, then. How was it working with Quentin Tarantino?
I think every actor, if they've been very good in their life and they go to heaven, they get to work with Quentin Tarantino. It is just a joy. And every actor on the film felt that way. I mean, I had a lot to do with Leo and also Timothy Oliphant. And Tim and I would sit there on the set and we would look at each other and say, I don't want to go home. I just never want to go home. I just want to stay here for the rest of my life, right here on this set, doing this. Because it's kind of everything you dream of. When you're a kid and you're lying awake at night and you're thinking, someday I want to be an actor, this is what it's like. This is working for him. He just makes the whole thing joyous all day long. You work hard, but the work is, there's fun attached to it all the way. And I think he's brilliant. And I was meant to be there right now doing the next one of his. But he, for reasons none of us quite know, he's decided to put it on ice for a while. But I was going to come back and play Sam Wanamaker again, which I still very, very much hope they still do. He was bringing 2 characters back from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was bringing the stuntman back that Brad Pitt played, and he was bringing Sam Wanamaker back. Because basically it's Hollywood about 5 years later. So it's Hollywood 1975 as opposed to Hollywood 1969. And beyond that, I know nothing, because with Quentin, you know nothing. You know, I mean, the nuclear secrets are easier to find out than what the script is about. I didn't know how Once Upon a Time in Hollywood ended until I went to the premiere. No one had told me, we weren't allowed to see the script. So if you weren't in that scene at the end, you didn't know how it ended, and no one was allowed to tell you. So, I mean, people have been fired off his movies in the past for telling people what goes on in the movie. So I got the pages of the scenes I was in. That was it. So people like Margot, I met Margot at the rap party at the end of the film, you know, and I met a lot of the actors. I hadn't seen them until because we weren't really invited to mix with each other, to share information about what was going on. So he's eccentric in that way, but I understand. The other thing he does, and I strongly recommend this in every school in the world, no cell phones. From the minute you arrive in the morning, your cell phone is put into a locked box, and you don't get it back until the end of the day. And no cell phones, no iPads, no electronic devices. And the extraordinary thing is what that does is, it focuses every single person in that room on what's actually going on in the scene. Because they're not over there in the corner sending texts and reading things and scrolling. They're watching the work. And that creates an energy that is just unlike any film I've been on since before cell phones. I think Sound of Music was one of the last films I can remember doing where absolutely everybody in the room would sit there and watch every single scene. So it's like you're doing theater in front of 85, 90 people. And believe me, that creates a whole different energy on the set, and I think about it. So for all those reasons, working with Quentin is a dream come true. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome to hear. And just the whole no cell phone, especially in a day and age where it's so pervasive everywhere and such focus. So that's very cool detail that I didn't even know. So, what are some other favorite roles besides working on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Spider-Man, Sound of Music? Other than those big three, what are some other favorite roles in your career?
Well, in film or television, I guess I'm just trying. Well, I did a Ray Bradbury science fiction miniseries called The Martian Chronicles with Rock Hudson and Gail Honeycutt, and it's such a brilliant story that Ray Bradbury wrote that it was just a joy to do it. And I had the pleasure of playing the central character in this particular storyline of a guy who goes back to Mars and thinks he's gone back to his own childhood. And it was so beautifully written that I think it was one of the most rewarding things I've done. And it's stood the test of time. It's still a very, very good show, I think. Also, weirdly enough, I think probably my very first job, which was Lord of the Flies when I was 10, only because it introduced me to this world. And it just made me realize it is possible to do something as extraordinary as this. And we had a wonderful director, Peter Brook, and he just made you feel like it's fun. It's fun to do a movie. And I still think that. And it's why I kept doing it my whole life. I mean, this is my 64th year as an actor, and it's never crossed my mind to do anything else, ever. I mowed lawns when I was 12, but that was only with my brother because he needed somebody to help him. But as a real job, I've never done anything but this, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. It's a tough job, it can break your heart, but for me, there's never been an alternative. There's never been anything that's given me the satisfaction or the camaraderie of the people that I've worked with over the years. That I think is the thing I feel most fortunate about. Is I've worked with such extraordinarily talented and kind and good and nice people. And you know, I find most actors, good actors, are really also just good people. At least that's been my experience. So, yeah, so I would say that really. Lord of the Flies started it.
What are the most challenging characters to play to you? Like, what are the traits in a role that you find are the most challenging aspects?
It's not all that hard to play somebody who's a bad guy, except it's challenging to play a bad guy who doesn't know he's bad. And I don't think most people, I don't think Adolf Hitler woke up in the morning and said, I'm the most terrible human being on the face of the earth. I think he thought he was a good person. We know he was a monster. We know he was one of the worst people in the history of the human race. But he didn't think that. And that is always the challenge for me. That is a big challenge. When you're playing somebody who is completely evil. I just played a corrupt televangelist who steals everybody's money and spends it on cocaine and prostitutes. Otherwise a nice guy. So to find a way to play somebody who just has like no redeeming value whatsoever, but you know, he's like a phony, you know, everything about him. And yet to somehow find a way in your own brain that you're not going to play this guy like a cartoon, you're going to play him like a real person who genuinely believes, you know, yes, okay. I mean, we all, some of us remember Jim and Tammy Baker. I don't think they thought they were terrible people. They probably thought, well, we're building this beautiful place because it'll inspire everybody, or whatever. I don't know what they told themselves. But I had to, so having to create that is difficult, I find. It's quite easy to play a nice person. But to play a genuinely, a person with virtually no redeeming qualities and still make them interesting, you know, because otherwise they're boring.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. If they're just like, if they're horrible from the first time you see them until the end of the movie, there's been no journey there at all. So, yeah, I would say that's it. Yeah.
So does playing that type of character affect you mentally at all when you get into the character? Does it ever put you in sort of a funk, you know?
That's the trick, I think, is to be able to leave it at work. It can be difficult. It depends. If you're playing, if you're having to go somewhere really dark, you know, into territory that is very, very difficult. Like the guy who played Dexter on television. I admire him because, you know, he had to go into serial killer territory or serial rapist territory or whatever. I just think takes you into such a terrible dark space that to find a way to play that and then at the end of the day get in your car and go home, that takes work. My wife is an actress and she has this expression, and I think she's right. She works in the theater mainly, and she plays a lot of tragic roles. And she said, your body doesn't know the difference between you acting that you're going through a trauma and really going through a trauma, because you're using exactly the same, you know, the same kind of stuff is coming up within you. So to do that 8 times a week on stage and have it not take a toll on you is very difficult. And it's the same. I mean, for good actors in film, you have to dig within yourself. You just have to. You can't stay on the surface. It won't work. So that's part of the discipline of it, though. It's a skill. It's a skill you learn like any other, you know. And but that's kind of one of the things people go to acting school for, because is to learn some of those basic skills. I never went to acting school. I was just always working, but I picked it up along the way. Yeah.
All right, and this will probably be just the last question before we open up the Q&A, because we have like,
yeah.
So just the inverse.